Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Jen. Today we're going to be making a Greek meatball rice bowl, and we're going to pair that with a homemade tzatziki sauce. And this is a really simple dinner. I don't know if you can tell from the sound of my voice, but I've been a little under the weather. I have some stuff going on, but I still wanted to make a nice dinner for my family on this night, so I thought I would keep it simple. If you are new here, you may not be aware, but I am cooking for a large family of 6 adults, so I always double my recipes, but I always leave measurements in the description box below for a single recipe. So the first thing that you're going to want to do for this recipe is get all of your fresh herbs chopped up. And what you're going to use here is about a half a cup of fresh chopped parsley, a half a cup of fresh chopped mint, and a half a cup of fresh chopped cilantro if you like cilantro. I know some people don't like cilantro, but if you like it, please include it here. The fresh herbs in this dish is really what makes these meatballs outstanding. And the more fresh herbs you can stuff into these little meatballs, the better they're going to taste at the end. Now I'm using ground turkey for this dish. You can use ground beef or ground lamb if you have access to that, but for me, ground turkey was basically just because I can get ground turkey for $1.98 a pound. And where I live in the world, ground beef for lean ground beef is close to $8 a pound right now. So I'm just switching it up to be a little more cost effective, but by all means, use ground beef or ground lamb if you have access to that. And if you're going to use lamb and you want it to be a little more cost effective, use half lamb and half beef. But we're doing turkey in this house on this day. So to whatever kind of meat that you decide to use, you're going to add about a half a cup of breadcrumbs. They can be fresh or dry, it doesn't matter. And about a half a cup of shredded Parmesan cheese. I'm also adding quite a bit of garlic to this. I'd say for a single recipe, 2 or 3 large cloves of garlic will be plenty. You want to mince those up pretty fine. I'm going to add 2 large eggs that I've sort of let come to room temperature. I probably could have went ahead and added another egg to this because these don't really look like large eggs to me, but I digress. You're going to add about a half a cup of red onion that you've chopped up pretty finely, and then you're going to add in all those fresh herbs that you diced up at the beginning. And you do want to go ahead and move pretty quickly through this recipe because the longer your herbs sit, the more chances of wilting they have. Then the last few things we're going to add is a teaspoon of dried oregano, and we're also going to put in a teaspoon of cumin powder. And if you're not really a fan of cumin, you can scale it back. If you really like cumin, you can add a little more. It's not that deep. With all seasonings, including salt and pepper, I say season to taste because what I may enjoy, you may think is too much. So season it the way you want to eat it. And then, of course, salt and pepper. As usual, add what you think you need to suit your taste. Then I'm going to come back with a gloved hand and just give everything in this bowl a really good mix until it's incorporated. Now, if you're using lamb or ground beef, be careful that you don't overmix. You don't want to make the meat tighten up and then end up with really tough, bouncy meatballs. Because this is ground turkey, there's not a lot of fat in this ground meat, so I don't really have to worry about overworking it and it getting tough like you would if you were doing ground beef. Just, for ground beef or lamb, you definitely want to try to mix in one direction and get it done quickly without overmixing. Now you can brown these on the stove in a skillet if you like, but as I said, I'm cooking for a big family and I'm already not feeling that well. So I decided to just use my smallest cookie scoop and roll these out and put them onto a foil lined tray, and I'm going to cook mine in the oven. It's just less tedious. For the amount of meatballs I'm making on this day, I would have stood over the stove for a really long time trying to get them all browned and cooked through. So please don't be afraid to take a shortcut now and then and roll out your meatballs and throw them in the oven. And once I'm all finished here, I ended up cooking these on 400 in the center of my oven for about 20 or 25 minutes. And I finished them off at the very end under the broiler for about 3 or 4 minutes, just because turkey has a tendency to not brown up like ground beef does. And I wanted to make sure that the tops of all of these lovely little meatballs were good and brown. So, just keep an eye on them. But while these are in the oven, we're going to go ahead and work on our tzatziki sauce. Now, I went to get cucumbers from our local grocery, and all of the cucumbers looked really gross. So I just bought these really small Persian cucumbers, and I grated them down and used them, and they worked out just fine. These don't really have any seeds in them, so I didn't have to end up splitting them down the center and scooping the seeds out. I just grated them directly into this bowl, and it just took a tiny little bit longer, but they still worked fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and squeeze out as much of the liquid as I can from these cucumbers because I don't want that floating around in my yogurt sauce. And you can see that let go quite a bit of liquid. And then I'm going to chop up about 1/4 of a cup of fresh dill. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I love fresh dill. So if that seems like too much for you for about 2 cups of yogurt sauce, scale the dill back. If you don't have fresh, you can use dried, but it's not going to taste as good. But yeah, just add as much dill as you like. I know people that would add twice as much dill to theirs. So, just do what makes you happy. And to this, I'm going to add just a little bit of garlic powder. You can add fresh garlic if you like. At this point, I'm going to be brutally honest. I had already cleaned my garlic press and I didn't feel like cleaning it again. So I just decided to use a little bit of granulated garlic, and that worked out just fine. I'm also going to add a couple little splashes of some lemon juice. If you have fresh lemons, that would be best, of course, but I don't have fresh lemons, so I just used some concentrated lemon juice. Salt and pepper to taste, and then I'm adding about 2 cups of Greek-style yogurt. You want to make sure that this is not the sweetened stuff. You don't want the stuff with honey in it or vanilla or any of that stuff. You just want it to be plain old Greek yogurt or whatever yogurt. If you make, your own homemade, use that. That's fine. You just want it to be a thicker consistency. I'm going to give this a really good mix to make sure all of that cucumber is distributed throughout the yogurt. All of the spices are mixed up. And then I'll definitely give it a taste to make sure it doesn't need any more salt and pepper. And then I'm going to pop this into the refrigerator to wait until the meatballs are done. Ideally, if you can make this sauce the night before, it will be even better, but I was a little pressed for time, so I'm just going to stick this in the fridge and let it hang out in there until I'm ready to put together these rice bowls. So since I'm using ground turkey, I wanted to make sure that I temped these meatballs to make sure that they were to temperature. And so I used my little meat thermometer and I went around and I poked the centers of a few of the meatballs just to make sure that they were all, warm enough to be considered completely done. And they were. So I will show you how I ended up serving these up. While I was making my meatballs, I let my Instant Pot do the work for me, and I did a big batch of jasmine rice. So in a bowl, I just put a nice sized pile of this fresh steaming jasmine rice, and I added, 5 or 6 or 7 or however many the person wanted meatballs. And then I have some thinly sliced red onion, and I have some cherry tomatoes here. These cherry tomatoes were enormous, by the way. I ended up having to quarter them because even cutting them in half, they were still too big. I'm also going to put some Kalamata olives on this pile here. And then I'm going to take and sprinkle over a little bit of feta cheese all over everything. We love feta in this house. If you are not into feta, you can substitute it for something else. That's fine. And then I'm going to get our tzatziki sauce, and I'm going to put a nice little pile of it right in the center. And I actually end up just mixing mine all together, but I know some of my children just like lined up the perfect bite. A half a meatball, little sauce, little onion, little tomato, etc. So they had the perfect bite every time, but I just mixed my sauce in. I topped it with a little bit more chopped parsley, and that is dinner. It's fresh, it's healthy, and it was definitely satisfying. So if you give this recipe a try, let me know down below in the comment section what you thought about it. And until next time, friends, happy cooking.